Every human being has an inner struggle, even if they seem strong, calm, or successful on the outside. Inside, there is often a storm of thoughts, doubts, fears, worries, and conversations that never leave the mind. You can be surrounded by people, smiling and doing everything right, and still feel like you are barely holding yourself together. This is not because you are weak. It is because the world never taught you how to care for your mind. We were taught how to work harder, chase goals, and survive, but not how to be still, let go, or think clearly when everything feels loud and urgent. Many people believe that every thought they have must be true. If a thought appears, they assume it means something important about who they are or what will happen. But the mind is not a place where truth is decided. Thoughts are not facts. They are often old memories, fears, habits, and past experiences repeating themselves. They sound like your voice because they have been with you for a long time, but that does not mean they represent who you truly are. You are not your thoughts. You are the one who notices them. When you realize this, even for a moment, everything begins to change. You stop being controlled by every fear or negative idea. You begin to notice a small space between what happens and how you react. In that space, you gain the power to choose. You can choose not to believe every painful story your mind tells you. You can pause instead of spiraling. You can stop turning rejection or failure into your identity. Many people spend years trying to fix themselves when nothing was ever broken. The real problem was believing their thoughts were facts. Thoughts like, I'm not good enough, nobody cares about me, or I'll never change are not truths. They are repeated ideas that only feel real because they've been repeated so often. Feelings are not facts, and thoughts do not define who you are. You are not your anxiety, your trauma, or your fear. You are the awareness that sees them. When you learn to observe your thoughts calmly, without fighting or judging them, they lose their power. Like clouds passing through the sky, they come and go if you let them. The goal is not to control the mind, but to understand it. Think of your mind like a garden. Some weeds grow without your permission. But once you notice them, you can decide whether to keep them or remove them. Slowly, with patience, you clear space for peace, clarity, and a more intentional life. The mind you choose to grow becomes the life you live. Clarity does not come from stopping your thoughts. It comes from understanding that not every thought deserves your time or energy. Peace is not about forcing the mind to be quiet. It is about learning not to react to every impulse that appears. This ability grows through awareness. In the beginning, when you stop responding to old thought patterns, the mind may feel louder and more uncomfortable. That is normal. It is like breaking an old habit that has controlled you for years. With time, calm returns. Not an empty calm, but one filled with your real self. The part of you that remains when emotions settle and worries pass. This process does not happen overnight. But even one small moment of noticing a thought without getting pulled into it is a victory. It creates a small opening where light enters. The more often you create this space, the less you live on autopilot. You begin to catch yourself before reacting. You start choosing your responses instead of being ruled by emotions. Slowly, you move from surviving your thoughts to actually living your life. Clarity does not come from thinking more. It comes from thinking less and observing more. It comes from creating space between who you are and what your mind says about you. That space is where your power lives. It is where your focus returns and your energy stops being wasted on fear and what-if scenarios. Life starts to feel lighter, not because thoughts disappear, but because they no longer control you. When a painful thought shows up, you can pause and ask yourself if it truly represents who you are or if it is just an old story repeated so many times that it feels true. Most of the time, it does not deserve your energy. It is just noise. And now, you are learning to hear that noise without becoming it. Awareness usually begins quietly. It often starts when you notice a familiar thought you've had many times before. This time, instead of reacting, you pause. You watch it. You don't follow it down the same path. You simply observe it, almost as if it belongs to someone else. In that moment, something powerful happens. You stop being caught inside the noise and become a witness to it. As you practice this, you begin to understand your mind better. You see patterns forming. Certain thoughts appear when you are tired, lonely, or uncertain. Others come from old beliefs you never chose but kept carrying. You realize these thoughts are not random. They are habits, and once you see them clearly, they lose their strength. What once felt like truth begins to sound like an echo, and just like an echo, it fades when you stop repeating it. You do not have to respond to every thought that appears in your mind. Awareness means understanding that you don't need to answer every mental call. A thought can appear, and you can let it ring without picking it up. When you do this, the hold those thoughts have over you becomes weaker. You are no longer trapped by automatic reactions. Awareness does not mean fighting your thoughts or trying to silence your mind. Many people believe they must erase thoughts completely, but that is not how the mind works. Instead of pushing thoughts away, awareness brings them into the light. When you clearly see a thought without judging it or running from it, it loses its power. Your relationship with the thought changes, and that change is the beginning of freedom. When you are unaware, thoughts feel urgent and real. Your body tightens, your breathing becomes shallow, and you react without thinking. But when you are aware, you interrupt this cycle. You notice the tension in your body and trace it back to the thought behind it. You begin to recognize that today's worry is just another version of yesterday's worry. When you see the pattern, you are no longer trapped inside it. You are observing it from a higher place. It can be empowering to realize that you don't have to believe every thought just because it feels familiar. Familiar does not mean true. The voice that tells you that you are not healing fast enough or not doing enough is often just an old habit, not reality. It may come from a past chapter of your life that no longer applies. As you practice observing without reacting, you start to separate what is actually happening from what your mind is creating. This takes time and patience. You will not succeed every time. Some thoughts will still pull you in, and some memories will still feel heavy. But even after those moments, you can step back and gently ask yourself what really triggered them. Asking that question without judging yourself is awareness. Over time, these moments of awareness untangle the knots in your mind. You begin to recognize repeating storylines, fear of failure, discomfort with silence, self-doubt. Once you see them clearly, they stop controlling you. You are no longer lost in the story. You are the one watching it. There is a familiar voice that appears when you feel abandoned or hurt. With patience and awareness, you can begin to recognize it instead of being controlled by it. Over time, you teach your mind a new response. This response is stillness, not the kind where you shut down or freeze, but the kind that comes from seeing clearly and not being pulled by every impulse. As Epictetus taught, what matters most is not what happens to you, but how you respond. Awareness gives you the space to choose that response. It does not erase pain or promise constant peace, but it gives you control over your next step. Those small choices matter. Over time, they build a path forward. They help you move out of the mental fog that once felt endless. If your thoughts feel overwhelming, too fast, or too loud, begin here. Do not start by trying to control your mind or fight it. Start with attention. Simply notice what is happening. Let awareness do what force never could. The mind calms not when it is pushed, but when it is understood. Some thoughts do not shout. They whisper. They stay quietly in the background of your mind, always present but rarely named. You often feel them in your body before you understand them with your thoughts. They appear when you are alone, when it is quiet, or when something small triggers a deep reaction. These thoughts remain not because they are too strong, but because they have never been acknowledged or expressed. They have never been written down or spoken aloud. Silence makes them heavier. We often believe that ignoring thoughts will make them disappear. But unspoken thoughts do not fade away. They sink deeper. They show up as tension, exhaustion, or strong reactions to small problems. You may tell yourself you are just tired or overwhelmed, but underneath that feeling, something is waiting to be heard. The longer it is ignored, the heavier it becomes. It may be unprocessed grief, loss, or pain that has not yet been given space. When you finally bring these thoughts into awareness, they begin to lose their weight, and the mind slowly finds relief. Anger you never admitted, fear you never named, or pain you tried to ignore does not disappear. You carry it quietly, like a secret, but your body remembers. Your nervous system holds onto it. Your focus weakens because part of your energy is always being used to keep those feelings locked away. Over time, this hidden weight shows up as tension, exhaustion, or emotional distance. Clarity is not about forcing positive thoughts. It is about being honest with yourself. Real honesty is powerful. There is something deeply healing about putting what has been unsaid into words. It does not need to be dramatic or shared with the world. Even whispering the truth to yourself, writing it in a journal, or speaking it alone in your car can begin to loosen its grip. Naming the feeling is the first step toward taking your power back. You are not defined by what you have buried. You are defined by your willingness to face it. Many people fear their own truth more than the judgment of others. We hide parts of ourselves, even from ourselves, believing that silence makes pain less real. But silence does not protect you. It only delays healing. Healing does not come from avoiding discomfort. It comes from walking through it with awareness and courage. The Stoics believed in facing discomfort directly. Marcus Aurelius wrote that if something can be endured, then it should be endured without complaint. This does not mean suppressing feelings. It means confronting them. What you refuse to face holds power over you, and you deserve to be whole. Sometimes the most healing action is not fixing a thought, but letting it speak. Writing is one of the simplest ways to do this. The words do not need to be perfect or organized. Let them be messy. Let the feeling be unfinished. Writing helps uncover what has been quietly shaping your moods, reactions, and relationships. Once it is out of your mind and onto the page, even a little, you begin to breathe again. Other times, healing comes through speaking with someone you trust. One honest sentence can release years of inner tension. Not because the other person fixes it, but because speaking the truth out loud takes away its hiding place. Hearing your own voice say what your heart has been holding can be freeing. It does not need to sound polished. It only needs to be real. And even if you are not ready to write or speak, you can still begin. A single deep breath where you admit, honestly and quietly, what you are feeling without turning it into a story is already a step toward healing. Sometimes the body can release emotions that the mind is still holding on to. Grief, anger, and guilt are not just thoughts. They live in the body, in the breath, the shoulders, the stomach. When you allow these feelings to rise and pass through instead of resisting them, you begin to feel lighter. Not because the pain disappears, but because you are no longer avoiding it. You have noticed it. You have listened to it. Knowing yourself is not only about thinking or understanding ideas. It is also emotional and physical. It means sitting with the parts of yourself you once avoided and realizing they are not as frightening as you imagined. These feelings were never trying to harm you. They were waiting for your attention. Pain that remains unspoken can be isolating. It can make you believe you are the only one struggling or carrying something too heavy to name. But when you bring even a small part of that pain into the light, you begin to see that many others are carrying their own hidden weight. In that moment, pain becomes a point of connection instead of separation. Strength grows from honesty, not from pretending everything is fine. There is nothing weak about struggling. There is nothing broken about having feelings you don't yet know how to express. Pain becomes heavier only when you believe it must stay hidden. You are allowed to speak, write, and feel. When thoughts finally find a voice, they stop whispering in the background and pulling your focus away. Once those thoughts are expressed, even imperfectly, they begin to lose their power. What once felt overwhelming becomes manageable. What once felt like a barrier becomes an opening. On the other side of that opening is not perfect peace, but space to breathe, clarity, and the ability to move forward. There is a kind of pain that does not shout. It stays quietly in the background, repeating old moments that should have ended long ago. You replay conversations, mistakes, and losses, hoping that if you think about them one more time, they will make sense or hurt less. But they never do. The past does not change. Only how you relate to it can change. When you keep reopening old wounds, you do not find healing. You only deepen the hurt. Those moments have already happened. What remains is just an echo. And echoes only harm you when you mistake them for the present. When you live as if old pain is still happening now, it steals your attention and focus. A mind full of the past cannot fully experience the present. When energy is spent on regret and replaying old memories, there is little left for clarity or growth. Most of the things we hold onto cannot be changed, yet they consume us. When you release their hold, you create room to see what is right in front of you and begin living again. You are not truly stuck because of what happened to you. You are stuck because you are still holding onto something that never gave you peace. Letting go does not mean pretending the past didn't matter or that the pain wasn't real. It means choosing not to let it define who you are today. It means stopping the search for new meaning in a chapter that has already ended. You allow the wound to close, not because it wasn't deep, but because you deserve to stop hurting. Letting go is often the first real step toward mental freedom. As Epictetus said, it is not events themselves that disturb us, but how we hold onto them. The pain comes not from what happened, but from how tightly we keep gripping it. Many people hold on because they believe pain protects them, that remembering it will prevent future mistakes. But memory alone does not protect you. Awareness does. You can learn from the past without carrying its full weight. You do not need to relive pain to respect the lesson it taught. Forgiving yourself is not weakness. It is discipline and strength. It means saying, I did the best I could with what I knew at the time, and now I choose to move forward. Forgiving others is not about them deserving it. Some people will never understand the harm they caused. Some will never change. But carrying their actions like a heavy burden only gives them continued power over your life. Forgiveness is not a gift to them, it is freedom for you. Letting go is not avoidance. True release means facing the memory honestly and choosing not to let it consume more of your life. Replaying the past will not bring new answers. It only brings exhaustion and disconnects you from the present moment. When you focus on what has already ended, you miss what is trying to grow right now. Ask yourself how much longer you are willing to let yesterday steal today. Letting go is not erasing the past. It is changing your relationship with it. You begin to look back without being pulled under. As you release old pain, your focus and energy return. Life feels possible again. Often, letting go is quiet and subtle. A memory appears and you breathe instead of reacting. A painful thought arises and you observe it rather than reliving it. You speak to yourself with more kindness. Over time, the weight lessens. The memory is still there, but it no longer controls you. There is also a quiet inner voice that follows you. It doesn't shout, it whispers. It sounds like your own thoughts, which makes it easy to believe. It tells you that you are behind, not doing enough or never good enough. Pushes you to keep going but never allows rest. Though it may feel like motivation, underneath it is fear of rejection, failure, and not measuring up. This voice is shaped by years of comparison, perfectionism, and expectations you may never have chosen. Recognizing this voice is the first step toward loosening its grip and reclaiming your peace. That critical inner voice did not come from nowhere. It learned its words from school systems, social media, critical family members, and years of comparison and self-doubt. Over time, it became automatic. You stopped questioning it and started listening. The more you listened, the more it shaped your choices. You avoided risks. You made yourself smaller. Eventually, you may have believed that voice was your true self. But it is not. It is a script that was written without your permission. And anything learned can be unlearned. You do not silence this voice by yelling at it or arguing with it. Fighting it only gives it more attention. You weaken it by proving it wrong through action. Not through big wins, but through small, quiet moments of courage. By showing up on hard days. By taking one step forward when the voice tells you not to try. By choosing progress instead of perfection. Perfection is one of the inner critic's strongest tools. If it can convince you that anything less than perfect is failure, it keeps you frozen. But the moment you choose movement over mastery, the voice begins to lose power. You do not wait for it to disappear before you begin. You begin while it is still there. Each action you take becomes real proof that the voice is not telling the whole truth. Over time, your attention shifts. The critic grows quieter, not because it is gone, but because you stop giving it control. You begin to hear a different voice. This one is shaped by experience instead of fear. It may still hesitate, but it feels kinder, feels steady, feels like you are finally on your own side. Accepting yourself fully can feel frightening. That may be why the inner critic exists, to stop you from doing it. Because once you accept yourself, including your flaws and unfinished parts, the critic loses its power. Shame only works when you believe something about you must stay hidden. The voice may still return, especially when you are tired or when you fail. But now you know better. You understand that failure does not define you. It teaches you. One bad day does not erase the progress you have made. Real peace does not come from everything being perfect. It comes from trusting yourself even when things are not. You do not owe that voice any explanations. You do not need to justify your pace or your growth. What matters is how you show up now. What matters is that you keep trying, learning, and caring, especially when it is difficult. Every time you do, you prove something important. You are not the voice in your head. You are the one who chooses what happens next. The inner critic is very good at creating fear. It takes imagined worries and dresses them up as truth. But once you begin to see this clearly, you start to reclaim your power. You realize how much of your pain came from stories that were never real. And with that awareness, you begin to live instead of simply survive. You start creating, speaking, trying, and growing, not because the voice disappeared, but because it no longer controls your actions. The goal is not to destroy the inner critic. It is to starve it, to stop giving it your energy, attention, and belief. You build a life where your actions matter more than the noise in your head. Your worth is no longer measured by perfection, but by presence, effort, and intention. The voice may still exist in the background like static, but you no longer tune into it. Choosing not to listen, day after day, becomes your freedom. Many people believe peace comes from quiet surroundings. But you can be in the calmest place in the world and still feel overwhelmed if your mind is racing. Real stillness is not about silence outside, it is about quiet inside. When your thoughts are stuck in worry about the future or regret about the past, even silence feels loud. Peace is not something you find by accident. It is something you practice. Stillness does not wait for life to become perfect. It appears when you stop needing everything to be perfect. You create stillness by learning to sit with yourself. Not to escape, distract, or fix, but simply to be. When you stop running from your mind, you finally begin to understand it. Our world values constant movement and productivity. We are taught that doing more means being more. So when we pause, we often feel guilty or lazy. But true stillness is not laziness. It is presence. Sitting quietly, breathing slowly, and watching your thoughts without chasing them takes courage. The moment you sit still, your mind will try to fill the space with old worries, memories, and fears. That is not failure, that is the purpose. Stillness is not about avoiding noise. It is about facing it calmly. You sit with whatever shows up and listen without judging or reacting. This kind of stillness changes you. It strengthens you from the inside. When you practice stillness, the future loses its grip and the past loosens its hold. You stop living for tomorrow and stop reliving yesterday. You begin to experience the only moment that truly exists, the present. Just breathing, just being alive. Nothing to fix, nothing to prove. This takes practice. Return to stillness daily, even for 5 or 10 minutes. No music, no phone, just breath and awareness. In that small space, your nervous system begins to relax. Your thoughts slow down. Clarity returns. Over time, that clarity follows you into your life. You become less reactive and more grounded. Stillness becomes a quiet guide, reminding you that you are not your impulses and you do not have to respond to every thought. When stillness lives within you, life's chaos does not shake you as deeply. You may still face stress, uncertainty, or loss, but instead of being overwhelmed, you respond with patience and presence. Your peace no longer depends on what happens around you. It lives inside you. Carl Jung believed silence helps people discover what is happening inside their soul. That is what stillness truly is, a mirror. It gives you a chance to see yourself without distractions, noise, or masks. What you find there is not always comfortable, but it is honest. And from honesty, real growth begins. Many people avoid stillness because they are afraid of boredom, but what they are really afraid of is meeting themselves. They fear the questions and truths that might appear. Until those things are faced, they quietly influence your choices, relationships, and habits. Stillness is not just peace. It is power. It brings hidden thoughts into the light. When you understand yourself deeply, the world outside feels less threatening. You become less dependent on noise and stimulation because you have learned to stand calmly within your own mind. That inner strength cannot be taken away. Give yourself that time now, not someday. Even a few quiet moments, a slow breath, and gentle awareness can begin to change how you live. Your mind builds your reality based on what you pay attention to. Attention is the raw material the mind uses most. Whatever you focus on repeatedly, fear, pain, gratitude, or growth, your mind adapts to it. Focus becomes habit. Habit becomes identity. This is why some people feel trapped in problems. It is not always because life is worse, but because attention has been trained toward pain. The good news is that attention can be redirected. When you slowly shift focus toward what is healing or meaningful, new mental pathways form. This is not about pretending life is perfect. It is about choosing what deserves your energy. Self-respect is often misunderstood. Many people think it means fighting back, proving strength, or matching someone else's aggression. But reacting with anger often leaves you feeling empty. True self-respect is quiet. It is the ability to walk away without losing yourself. When you react to someone else's chaos, you abandon your own values. The real conflict is not between you and them. It is between your calm self and your need to be right. Most emotional damage begins subtly, through small comments, silence, or criticism. You replay it in your mind, wondering if they were right. This is how self-respect slowly erodes, not through their words, but through your belief in them. Not all criticism contains truth. Often, people speak from their own pain, insecurity, or frustration. Their words reflect their inner world, not your worth. Real self-respect begins when you stop absorbing what does not belong to you. Not every opinion deserves a reaction. Not every insult deserves your attention. Hurt people often hurt others, not always on purpose, but out of habit. When you understand this, you stop taking everything personally. You protect your peace, keep your dignity, and remain aligned with who you truly are. This is how you move through life with clarity, calm, and inner strength. When someone criticizes, belittles, or insults you, it can create a spiral of self-doubt. You start adjusting the way you speak, your truth, and your boundaries just to avoid conflict or avoid being hurt again. You might try to earn their approval, be better, or prove them wrong. Not because you agree with them, but because you fear they might be right. That fear and self-doubt make their words stick in your mind. But what if you stopped letting them be the judge of your value? What if you reminded yourself that not every voice deserves a place in shaping your identity? Seneca wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." The same idea applies to approval. It is not the lack of validation that weakens you, but the craving for it. Seeking approval from people who belittle or misunderstand you cracks your inner foundation. True self-respect is the quiet choice to stop seeking understanding from people who cannot or will not give it. Walking away without arguing may feel like defeat. Saying nothing may feel like surrender. But it is not. It is protection. It is wisdom. It is strength. You are not here to fix everyone else's projections or decode their passive aggression. You are here to guard your peace. That means learning to tell the difference between feedback that helps you grow and words that only shrink you. Both can appear as truth, but not all truths are yours to carry. Next time someone says something hurtful, pause. Don't react immediately. Ask yourself, is this about me, or is it about them? If you feel you need to twist yourself to make sense of it, it is not for you to solve. It is theirs to carry. Let their words echo in their own mind, not yours. Let their projections stay with them where they belong. The moment you believe your value depends on someone else's perception, you have given them control of your self-worth, and that key belongs only to you. Respecting yourself in front of toxic people doesn't mean ignoring all critique. It means recognizing which voices offer real wisdom and which are simply echoes of someone else's pain. In that recognition, you reclaim something vital: your peace, your clarity, and the unshakable truth that you do not have to prove your worth to anyone who has forgotten their own. Most of us replay these conversations in our minds, analyzing every word, every pause, every tone. Maybe I should have stayed calmer. Maybe I should have explained my feelings differently. Maybe I shouldn't have said anything at all. But this habit keeps giving away your power. Your value is not decided by their words. Your self-respect begins when you stop replaying, stop explaining, and start holding your peace as sacred. You think about messages you never sent, letters you'll never write, and closure you'll never get. Deep down, there's a hope that if you say the right words, take the right tone, or show enough understanding and patience, they will finally see you, hear you, and change. But that hope is a trap. The more energy you spend trying to change someone else, the more power you give away. Toxic people can sense when you need their approval, and suddenly they control your mood, your peace, your emotional state. You find yourself walking on eggshells, not because you are weak, but because you believe you can fix them or the situation. That belief is what keeps you stuck. Trying to change them may feel kind or noble, but it's not true compassion, it's captivity. When your well-being depends on someone else's growth, you are chained to them. They may give a few kind words after being cruel, a small apology without real change, or moments of vulnerability that make you believe they just need more time. But time doesn't heal a wound if the knife is still twisting. The hope that your love will fix them is the same hope that keeps you shrinking. Each time you justify their bad behavior, you tell yourself a dangerous lie, that your love is supposed to cure their chaos. It is not, and it never was your job. Epictetus said, "Some things are up to us and some things are not. Their behavior, choices, and willingness to face themselves are not up to you. If your peace depends on their change, you've given your power to someone who has already shown they cannot handle it responsibly. You were never meant to carry the full weight of someone else's self-awareness, especially when they refuse to carry it themselves. Many of us are taught that love fixes everything, that patience, support, and selflessness can bring out the best in someone. But some people do not want to change. They do not want understanding. They want control. They will take your patience and use it as a leash, pulling you back into their cycle whenever you try to leave. You stay because walking away feels like giving up, but staying slowly erodes who you are. Your laughter fades, your trust in yourself weakens, your confidence shrinks under their disapproval, and you begin asking permission to feel, think, or set boundaries. By the time you notice how much you've lost, you may start blaming yourself. The truth is, you don't need them to change to be free. You don't need their understanding to heal, their apology to move on, or their approval to feel worthy. You only need permission to stop playing a role in their story and start writing your own. When you accept that their growth is not your responsibility, you reclaim your power. You begin to feel your own weight again, not as a burden, but as grounding. Peace comes not from winning their approval, but from walking away from the war entirely. Seneca wrote, "He who is brave is free." In this context, freedom is choosing not to fight battles that do not belong to you. You don't need to change them. You need to win yourself back. Radical clarity is key. Understand what belongs to you and what never did. Stop trying to fix them, and allow yourself to feel guilt, knowing it's normal because you've been taught that love means sacrifice. But real love and self-respect are not about bleeding for someone who keeps hurting you. It is about knowing when the most loving act is letting go. Next time you catch yourself drafting explanations, softening your truth, or trying to justify your boundaries to make them listen, pause. Ask yourself, am I speaking to be heard, or am I still trying to fix something that isn't mine? Give yourself permission to stop. Permission to be misunderstood. Permission to be unloved by someone incapable of loving with care. Permission to be free without needing them to understand. You do not need closure from someone who never opened up. You do not need peace from someone who thrives on your chaos. You do not need to change anyone to feel worthy of the life you deserve. Self-respect is realizing that loving yourself means refusing to bargain with people who offer pieces of peace in exchange for your whole soul. It is not about changing them. It is about changing what you will no longer tolerate. And that is what finally sets you free. Sometimes when someone provokes you, you tell yourself that you had no choice, that they deserved it, or that you were standing up for yourself. In that moment, it can feel like power. You may feel like you finally turned the tables. But after the moment passes, something inside you feels off. Not because they hurt you, but because you went against your own values. Not because they crossed a line, but because you abandoned one of your own. That subtle sense of betrayal lingers, the betrayal of your better self. It often starts easily. They manipulate you and you start to match it. They lie, and you become sharper, more cunning. They play the victim and you twist the truth to stay ahead. You do this not to hurt, but to survive, to protect yourself in a world that doesn't feel fair. But each time you act this way, you step further away from your real self and closer to who they want you to be, reactive, unstable, and easy to provoke. That is not strategy, it's surrender. The real goal of toxic people isn't always to win an argument. Their goal is to make you lose yourself. You feel it in your gut when you realize you've started acting like them. You've adopted their tactics, their tone, and their words. Even if it feels justified, something important is lost. Your peace, integrity, and sense of self. And deep down, you know they see it. You know your reaction was exactly what they wanted, not to defeat you, but to change you. Marcus Aurelius said, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." This is not about revenge, it's about self-respect. When you mirror their toxicity, you don't just ruin your image in their eyes. You break the image you hold of yourself. That quiet pride you once had, when you walked away from chaos with your head held high, disappears. What you get instead is a hollow victory, one that costs more than it's worth. You can try to justify it, saying it was necessary to teach them a lesson, or that staying silent would have been weak. But if winning means becoming someone you are not, what did you really win? Toxic people pull you into conflict not to defeat you, but to change you. When you play by their rules, you confirm their power. You become another echo in their noise instead of the calm that could unsettle them more than any argument. There is a deep discomfort in holding your ground without fighting back, in staying calm when someone tries to shake you, and in choosing your values over your ego. It may feel like losing or that they are getting away with it, but real strength is quiet. It is restraint, self-governance, and walking away not because you are weak, but because you are strong enough to protect your character over your pride. We often mistake silence for passivity or kindness for weakness. But weakness is stooping to their level to feel powerful. Passivity is letting your emotions be controlled by someone else. And the real harm is pretending that the damage you cause in reaction is nobler than the harm they caused. It is not about who started it. It is about who you become while it is happening. When provoked, you can feel the fire rising, the sharp burn in your chest, your pulse quickening, and your mind racing. That is natural. It is a biological surge of energy demanding release. But feeling something does not mean you have to become it. The space between what happens and how you respond, that gap, is your power. In that space, you can choose to stay calm, not mirror the chaos, and not let it define you. A person with good character is not easily broken, but it can slowly wear down over time. This happens every time you justify doing something that goes against your values just to prove a point. Those small compromises build up, and eventually you might not recognize yourself. Not in the mirror, but in how you think, speak, and act, especially when you're angry. That's the real cost. That's what toxic people want. Not to beat you in an argument, but to slowly erode the person you are. So the next time you feel the urge to match their anger, to fight their game, pause. Not because they deserve your silence, but because you deserve your peace. Real strength isn't shown by how hard you fight. It's shown in what you choose to protect. When you protect your values, your energy, and your inner balance, you win something they can never take from you. The right to stay true to yourself. This quiet triumph doesn't need applause. It lets you sleep peacefully at night. Over time, it builds a life that feels untangled, clean, and free. Not because you outsmarted toxic people, but because you refused to become like them. In a world that constantly pushes you to react, staying rooted in who you are is the greatest rebellion. Silence often makes toxic people uncomfortable because it interrupts their chaos. When someone insults you, your instinct might be to defend yourself, explain, or retaliate. You want them to understand, to take back control. But silence is often stronger than the sharpest reply. It doesn't ignore the attack, it refuses to feed it. Silence is not weakness. It is a conscious choice to protect your inner world. It's strategic, choosing your battles carefully so others realize they cannot control your peace. When someone throws their worst at you and all you give is calmness, that calmness speaks louder than any words. It communicates, "You don't control me. You don't decide my worth. You don't deserve my reaction." Toxic people thrive on reactions. They want to see you flinch, explode, or defend yourself. Every time you react, even with clever words, you confirm their power over you. That's not strength, it's permission. But silence terrifies them. Silence isn't nothing. It's a statement. It shows indifference, detachment, and peace. For someone who thrives on chaos, there's nothing more unsettling than realizing you are no longer affected. Once they lose your attention, they lose control. And that, in itself, is real power. Carl Jung once wrote, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." This means that real clarity and understanding come when you stop searching for answers from others and start looking within yourself. Silence is that moment, the pause between what someone says and how you react. It's the space where you choose to protect your peace and dignity instead of responding to their chaos. When you practice this regularly, silence becomes a strong boundary. It's an invisible line that says where you end and where others cannot enter. You don't need to explain yourself to everyone, especially to people committed to misunderstanding or manipulating you. Every time you over-explain, over-justify, or over-defend, you give away energy that should be yours. Silence grounded in self-awareness becomes an anchor, keeping you steady even while the storm rages outside. But silence isn't easy. It often feels uncomfortable because part of you wants the last word, wants to prove yourself right, wants to expose hypocrisy. Sometimes that urge disguises itself as justice. But what good is being right if it costs your peace? What victory is worth stepping out of alignment with your values? Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." How much of your life is wasted replaying arguments, rehearsing comebacks, or thinking about people who never deserved your attention? Imagine what it would feel like to stop, to see provocation for what it is, recognize it and walk away, not with resentment, but with calm, not with coldness, but with clarity. Not because it didn't hurt, but because you refuse to let it control your reaction. Silence doesn't mean you aren't feeling anything. It means you feel it without letting it dictate your behavior. You carry the discomfort without unloading it on someone else. That is emotional maturity, restraint, and self-respect at its highest. When you no longer need to prove a point to protect your power, a quiet strength develops. People who practice this move differently, speak less, and carefully choose where to place their energy. They don't rise to bait, not because they don't feel, but because they respond only to what aligns with their values. That is how people become untouchable, not by building walls, but by staying rooted in themselves. So the next time someone insults or provokes you, resist the impulse to respond. Let them sit in the silence they created. That silence communicates more than words ever could. It reminds them and you that your peace is not up for debate. You hear yourself in that silence, your clarity, your boundaries, your strength. You don't need to be loud, prove a point, or fight. Sometimes the most powerful thing is to do nothing, pause, breathe, and let your calm speak for you. From a young age, we are taught to say no gently, give reasons, apologize, and make others feel okay about our decisions. That lesson sticks. So when someone crosses a line, instead of clearly drawing it, we cushion it with justifications. Toxic people use those explanations not to understand you, but to argue, to convince you that your limits are unfair or selfish. Before long, your boundary crumbles under their questions, guilt trips, and pushback. You may think being nice will make them respect your limits. But people who respect you don't need explanations. They respect the boundary itself. Boundaries don't need long explanations. In fact, with certain people, the more you explain yourself, the more they twist your words to manipulate you. You might start feeling like your peace is up for debate, like it can be negotiated or changed if they just keep pushing long enough. That's not how it should be. You don't need to justify your limits with long explanations. You don't need to defend why you're tired, why you said no, or why something doesn't work for you. Saying something simple like, "This doesn't work for me," is enough. It's not rude. It's not mean. It's clear. And clarity is a form of kindness, especially to yourself. The reason setting boundaries can feel so hard is that many of us have spent years wearing the people-pleaser mask. We were taught that being kind means always saying yes, even when it drains us, even when it costs something important, our energy, our values, or our peace of mind. That mask starts to feel like our true self, and we lose track of what actually matters. But real goodness is not measured by how much of yourself you give away. Sometimes it's measured by how firmly you protect what's sacred, your energy, your time, your values, and your mental space. Seneca once wrote, "No one can wear a mask for very long. Eventually, the truth will surface. If you keep saying yes to everything, pretending to please everyone, eventually resentment builds, exhaustion shows, and you start feeling sick inside even as you smile. That discomfort is your soul's way of reminding you that sacrificing yourself to please others is not true compassion. It's abandonment of yourself. The moment you start setting boundaries without feeling the need to apologize, you begin to reclaim your self-respect. You stop filtering every decision through how others will react and start asking, "Does this protect my well-being?" That small shift is powerful. It's the shift from seeking approval from others to living in alignment with your own truth. You're no longer bending for anyone. You're standing firm in your values. And yes, some people won't like it. They may push back, complain, or even criticize you, but your peace is more important than their approval. When you start setting boundaries, some people will call you difficult, cold, or selfish. But the truth is, the people who benefit most from your lack of boundaries are often the first to object when you finally build them. That isn't a reason to stop. It's proof you're doing something different, something healthy, something necessary. You don't need to convince anyone that your boundaries make sense. The people who genuinely care about you won't need convincing. They'll listen. They'll respect it. They might not always agree, but they won't try to manipulate or argue with it. That's the difference between someone in your life to connect and someone in your life to control. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." You can't become that person if you're constantly changing yourself to keep others comfortable. Boundaries create space for the real you to breathe. They aren't walls, they are doors with locks, and you decide who gets the key. There's freedom in realizing you don't have to explain yourself every time you choose yourself. Choosing rest, silence, space, or distance isn't selfish. It's self-awareness. You are allowed to say no, to skip an event, or to not answer right away. You are allowed to protect your nervous system without feeling guilty. If someone makes you feel bad for that, it just shows you why the boundary was necessary. No is a full sentence. This doesn't work for me is clear. You don't need to fill the silence with explanations. Let the silence speak for you. Let your stillness be your stance. Let your peace be protected by your willingness to stand firm, not by your words. And if someone can't handle that, let them go. Keeping them comes at too high a cost if it means giving up parts of yourself to maintain the illusion of harmony. Real harmony doesn't come from giving in. It comes from standing tall. Boundaries aren't about shutting people out. They're about keeping yourself whole. Not everyone will understand, but the people who matter and respect your worth won't need explanations. And the ones who don't understand, give them your silence, not your energy, because your peace was never up for debate. There's a moment most people don't notice. It comes right after the insult, the passive-aggressive remark, or the condescending tone. Your chest tightens, your jaw locks, your breath shortens. Your body reacts before you even realize it. You feel the instinct to defend, to retaliate, to make them feel the sting they gave you. But under that rush is a quiet choice. A gap between what happened and how you respond. That space is everything. That's where your power lives. Not the kind of power that explodes outward, but the kind that builds inward. The kind that holds, waits, and remembers. In those few seconds of silence, you can remember that not every battle is yours to fight. Not every jab needs a response. Some attacks are just meant to see if they can pull you off balance. But if you stay in that space and breathe through it, you take back control, not of them, but of yourself. Most people don't pause long enough to realize they have that choice. They react automatically. But when you choose not to react, you protect your peace, maintain your integrity, and stand strong without giving your power away. When someone pushes your buttons or raises their voice, they often call it honesty or standing up for themselves. But what they're really doing is giving someone else control over how they feel. They're letting another person decide whether they feel calm or angry, stable or chaotic. That's not strength. It's surrender disguised as intensity. The Stoics taught that freedom isn't about controlling the outside world. It's about controlling how you respond to it. You can't make people stop being cruel, careless, or manipulative. But you can choose not to become cruel, careless, or manipulative in return. That's the difference between reaction and response, between chaos and clarity. Carl Jung wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Accepting yourself means recognizing all your emotions, rage, hurt, bitterness, without letting them take control. You don't deny them, you don't suppress them, but you also don't let them speak for you. You let the feelings rise and settle. That's emotional maturity. It's not pretending nothing affects you. It's choosing not to let your pain drive your actions. In that pause, you reclaim your identity. You show yourself that you aren't just reflecting the energy someone gives you. You are a filter. You decide what passes through and what you let go. That choice builds self-respect, the kind that doesn't come from putting others in their place, but from standing firmly in your own. Sometimes, even when you pause, you'll still feel your heart racing or the heat of anger. That's okay. Mastery doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means you stop letting the feeling control you. You let it pass without holding on to it. You let insults hang in the air without taking them in. Once you respond without thinking, the situation gains more life than it deserves. Reacting might feel good at first, but that satisfaction fades quickly. What remains is what you gave up. Your calm, your pride, your ability to say, "I stayed true to myself." Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Strength comes from holding your inner line when everything outside tries to pull you off it. Imagine giving yourself even a few seconds, just a breath, to ask, what response protects my values? Not what wins, not what hurts them back, not what makes you feel superior, but what keeps you aligned with who you are. That kind of reflection changes everything. Over time, those few seconds build distance between you and chaos, between you and manipulation, and between you and the version of yourself that reacts without thinking and regrets it later. That distance becomes a boundary, an invisible force that toxic people can't break because it protects the part of you that chooses before it acts. Seneca once wrote, "As long as you live, keep learning how to live." The space between what happens to you and how you respond is where this learning takes place. It's in that space that you meet the real version of yourself, not the version shaped by stress or anger, but the one shaped by thought, reflection, and awareness. This is the part of you that remembers what truly matters even when everything around you feels chaotic. It's the part that chooses not to perform for someone else's amusement, that walks away quietly, not to escape, but to remain whole. You don't have to win every argument or prove yourself with the perfect response. Sometimes the strongest statement you can make is the one you never say. If you speak from anger or reaction, you become part of the storm. But if you speak from calm, reflection, and intentionality, you become unshakable. In a noisy world, that kind of quiet strength makes people stop, makes them listen, and most importantly, keeps you free. Toxic people are experts at twisting reality. They want you to believe that walking away is a weakness, that if you were really strong, you would stay and fight. They want you to think silence means surrender and peace means giving up. The truth is, they don't fear your arguments, they fear your absence. They don't fear your anger, They fear your indifference. The moment you stop needing their attention, approval, or understanding, they lose control. We are often taught that letting go is for weak people, that walking away makes you a quitter or emotionally unavailable. But that's the story that serves people who rely on your constant return. They want you tethered, emotionally invested, and endlessly hoping they will change. You want closure, healing, to be seen, and to be heard. So you try again and again. But every time you re-engage, you step back into their arena where the rules are always stacked against you. Letting go isn't weakness. It's clarity. It's seeing things for what they are instead of what you wish they could be. It's realizing that your time, peace, and emotional energy are not endless resources to be drained by someone who only returns chaos and confusion. The illusion is that staying will create peace. The reality is that leaving is what peace has been waiting for. You don't need to be understood by someone who refuses to understand you. You don't need validation from someone who only sees your worth when it serves them. You don't need to keep proving yourself to someone whose power depends on your self-doubt. There comes a moment when you stop trying to be chosen by others and start choosing yourself. That moment is the start of freedom. Freedom may not feel comfortable at first. It can feel like emptiness or loss, like something important is missing. But that ache isn't a sign that you made a mistake. It's a sign that you are reclaiming your life, your peace, and your self-respect. Letting go is stepping away from chaos. It's the space that appears when dysfunction finally leaves your mind and your nervous system. Don't confuse this feeling with regret. What you're feeling is space, and space, when protected, becomes peace. Many people spend years believing that if they could just communicate better, stay calmer, or explain their side one more time, the relationship would finally work. They hope that the next version of themselves, more patient, more forgiving, more evolved, will make a difference. But relationships built on distortion and manipulation can't be fixed by self-improvement. The problem isn't your growth. It's that the other person refuses to meet you anywhere close to it. When you let go, you don't lose. You win something invisible but priceless: self-trust. You regain the ability to hear your intuition and honor it. You reclaim the quiet dignity that comes from no longer needing someone else to see your value for you to believe it yourself. This isn't defeat. It's the deepest kind of freedom. And it's not loud. It doesn't come with applause or recognition. It comes quietly. In long walks alone, meals where you don't have to explain yourself, and nights without crying over conversations that go nowhere. Marcus Aurelius said, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment." That is exactly what letting go is. It isn't erasing a person or erasing history. It's revoking their power over how you feel about yourself. It's deciding to stop giving meaning to their approval, their presence, or their praise. When you remove their voice from your inner dialogue, something remarkable happens. You hear your own voice. Self-respect isn't loud or performative. It isn't something you announce. You show it by how you move through life, how you stop over-explaining, how you say no without flinching, and how you let people go, not out of anger or bitterness, but out of clarity. That clarity, that quiet power, is freedom itself. Letting go is learning to stop holding doors open for people who have already walked away from your life. You don't stop caring because you're cold or unkind. You stop caring in that way because you finally care enough about yourself. You were never meant to convince anyone to treat you well. Your job isn't to argue or plead. Your job is to live in a way that makes it clear their inability to treat you well disqualifies them without negotiation. Letting go isn't just about them. It's about reclaiming the energy that kept you tied to a story that didn't serve you. It's about ending a chapter that drained your potential just to keep the plot going. When you feel that your peace has become heavier than your presence in someone else's life, it's not a sign to try harder. It's a signal to return to yourself, to your center, to the version of you that doesn't need anyone else's approval because they've already chosen themselves. That's not the end of the story. It's where your real story begins. There's another truth we often forget. You teach people how to treat you through what you tolerate in silence and what you allow through your presence. Every time you let the same pattern hurt you, every time you excuse behavior that you know isn't right, You are writing a script for how others will see and treat you. You do it not because you're weak, but because you care. You want to believe in their better nature. You hope your patience will inspire change. But eventually, you realize that the longer you wait for someone else to change, the more you risk being changed by them, and not in a way that grows or strengthens you, but in a way that slowly erodes your sense of worth. You begin bending without noticing, hesitating before you speak, and losing little pieces of yourself over time. That's the danger of staying in a story that doesn't honor your value. Letting go is stepping out of it and reclaiming yourself. You might start to wonder if what you're feeling even matters. That's how emotional erosion happens, not all at once, but slowly, piece by piece. You may keep showing up, smiling, and saying the right things, but inside, the weight of what you haven't said and the boundaries you haven't set builds up. You shrink so gradually that you barely notice it. The danger is when your tolerance for dysfunction becomes your idea of love. Many people call it fate. This is just how they are. This is what love looks like. This is what I deserve. But it's not fate. It's conditioning, fear disguised as loyalty. Once you see it clearly, you start to take back control. You learn that being kind doesn't mean being passive. Being empathetic doesn't mean absorbing all someone else's pain. And being emotionally available doesn't mean being emotionally exposed. Real strength lives in quiet daily choices. Deciding to respond differently, stepping away when it's easier to stay, stopping explanations to people who only want to argue. You don't need a dramatic confrontation to reclaim yourself. Sometimes it's just a slow withdrawal, a steady return to your own rhythm. You answer less, explain less, smile only when you mean it. That's the beginning of true power, the kind that doesn't need to prove itself. As you stop trying to win people over, your self-respect becomes unconditional. You stop waiting for apologies to feel whole. You stop needing validation to move forward. The absence of peace becomes louder than the presence of chaos. And listening to that brings you back to honoring yourself in the places you once betrayed yourself the most. You learn the difference between growth and gaslighting, between constructive feedback and manipulation, between truth and distortion. And when that line is clear, so is your next step. You don't need to hate them, get even, or make them understand. Sometimes closure is just keeping the door closed, for yourself, not out of spite. In that choice, you reclaim energy once spent on confusion, doubt, and cycles that led nowhere. You become your own center. Not guarded, but grounded. Not detached, but discerning. You speak more intentionally. You show up rooted. You stop chasing people who won't meet you where you are. You see people clearly for who they are, not for what you hope they might become. That shift in seeing reality protects you and keeps you whole. Protecting your peace is not selfish. It's sacred. You don't need anyone's permission to do it. If someone can't treat you with respect, clarity, and care, you don't have to meet them halfway. You can love from a distance, forgive quietly, and move on without a dramatic goodbye. Healing doesn't need witnesses. Sometimes it only needs one decision and the courage to keep walking. Not because you're cold, but because you're done setting yourself on fire to keep someone else comfortable. Walking away isn't the end of love. It's the beginning of self-respect. In a world that asks you to constantly explain, prove, and endure, choosing peace is the loudest statement you can make. Let go not to escape them, but to return fully to yourself.